after Trump presidency compared to the past few years? Is there anything that you see things going differently with you?
Well, I think there's going to be some different things potentially coming out of the federal government that, in my opinion, would help our state and our states across the nation. But you know, there's clearly going to be probably new things when it comes down from EPA standards to new, like I had said just recently, energy standards, and quite clearly healthcare. So depending on those things that happen, we will of course be prepared to react. And I don't think that the first passage of a budget for us is going to be the last. We're probably going to have to come back and do some corrective budgets because of maybe potential things that'll happen from the federal government. I don't know, I'm not trying to be a genie, but I'm just saying we should be prepared for that's probably going to happen, and we might look at that.
But as far as the way you've run things for the past 2 years, you don't see yourself changing how you run things?
No, I don't know why we would change how we run things. I think if anybody's looked back at our last 2 years, we've had a very conservative legislature that continues to push a conservative agenda, and now with a White House that's under Republican control, we hopefully will be able to see those policies that we have tried to pass and continue to pass in the last 2 years strengthened by what we do in the next 2.
Speaking of how you run things, next year you're going to have the largest majority caucus since the 99-member chamber.
Well, we've done pretty good with 65. We're only growing by 1,
yeah,
so I don't think it's gonna.
But it's another voice in there. Plus the fact you're adding the likes of Larry Householder, Keith Faber, Bill Seitz, Tom Patton, some very strong personalities, and some who are angling for your job when you're done with it. How are you going to handle all that?
Well, I plan to be speaker till January of 2019, so you know clearly there's going to be a speaker's race. You know, people can get into whatever they want to. I will say this though, I don't see it as a bad thing that members, especially former leaders, are coming back into the caucus that will bring institutional knowledge and experience to help strengthen our caucus into the future. So, you know, Bill Seitz and Tom Patton, of course, Tom's in my leadership team. Bill's also part of that leadership team. Bill and Tom both give very valuable, and have in the past, experience and advice to me, and I continue to look forward to having that. And quite frankly, I look forward to having the advice of Keith Faber and Larry Householder too. I mean, Keith and I talk a lot, and we will continue to do so when he's in the House, and truthfully, I don't see a problem with it. I mean, they're both former leaders too, and I think there is a sense of respect for what leaders have to go through and what they're doing, and I don't foresee them having any issue with that. As to what happens after I'm gone, that's up to the caucus to make a decision too. So, I'm not concerned with that.
The governor is expected to come back with another tax reform plan. Has anything changed over the last 2 years to make your caucus a little bit more open to some of his proposals? Severance tax, sales tax expansion?
Well, we've had the 2020 tax committee going forward. To the question of severance tax, that's kind of been answered through that committee process, and that is until market conditions improve, we are not going to move forward and do anything. So, and again, I think we need to be cautious and wait, and I think the administration's doing the same thing, see what happens in December and January as we go forward as to what their overall budget will look like. We're watching it as well, and we'll see how that goes forward as to what we can do beyond that with any kind of, you know, tax package. What we have to be ready and always keep the number one thing in my mind, and that is predictability and certainty in the future for our businesses so that they can continue to grow and create the jobs that are necessary to make sure our economy is strong. So that's what we'll be looking forward to continuing to make sure is our number one priority when it looks at any kind of issue, especially when it comes to tax issues.
Should we be looking at for more income tax cuts, whether they're a net income tax cut or not?
Well, I guess I'll say it again. We'll wait to see how we continue to move forward into December and January as to what we actually facilitate. But again, you know, if we can find a way to do it and it makes things you know, balance out at the end, and we don't put the state into a perilous state going forward, then we're going to do that, because more money in the pockets of those that are creating the jobs and the families that are out there is better for them versus us having it. So.
Have you been following this high school graduation issue happening where high school juniors are not meeting the requirements they need to graduate?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we're listening to it and hearing a lot more about this. It's something that's just started to really percolate here in the last few months. This is an extreme concern to us, and of course, part of the issue that we're going to continue to look forward to is education issues and how we can continue to strengthen those. I just met with actually folks with the teachers union not too long ago to talk with them about how it is we can continue to strengthen our schools and focus more on not necessarily grade level education, but mastery based education, ensuring kids have a true mastery of what they're doing in their classes. And I would use this as an example. If you take Spanish 101 and you're not learning how to conjugate, you can't, and you just pass because you just know the basics to get through a test. You get to 102, if you still have trouble conjugating and you haven't built a mastery base for it, you're going to set yourself up for failure. So we want to make sure that kids have a true mastery of what they're learning as they go through, and that's part of a bigger thing I'd like to have a conversation with in the next General Assembly.
Any thoughts on the school funding plan that your education chairman rolled out?
Well, I haven't really looked all into the details, and Chairman Brenner and I haven't sat down and talked with it, but of course, you know, it's a conversation that we will likely have even more into the next General Assembly. Clearly nothing's happened in this General Assembly, so I think he just wanted to start a conversation about it, and that'll be part and play what we do, of course, in the next budget too, and what we look at. Now, I'll caution though and say, anything that continues to change goalposts on our schools too much is something that I will not and do not want to see happening. We've got to try to keep our folks in a little bit of a constant pattern and let them catch up. If we keep changing the goalposts, it's not going to help anybody.
What about funding for e-schools? I know the auditor has talked about performance-based funding. Is that something you guys are looking at?
I mean, nothing's off the table. There's a lot of issues. Performance-based funding is, of course, something that is out there for a while, and something we'll continue to look at and facilitate whether that works for e-schools or not.
What's the timeline for the process on unemployment compensation reform?
Well, as you know, we had a great meeting I don't know how many weeks ago that now was, probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, with both business and labor at the table, and they have to April of 17th, April of 17 to give me get us a report back on a compromise that can continue to get us to a place of solvency that is within an appropriate time frame, and that appropriate time frame is hopefully within a 7-year period or under, if we can even get that, which is it's going to be a tough way to go, but I think that there's ways to get there. And like I said, prior to this announcement, we had several very good conversations about ways we could do that, but I think this is a good step forward because it'll allow for, like in the press conference we had, both labor and business going to bring an actuarial to the table that can help us run those numbers, get a better feel for where we're headed so that we can get to solvency in the quickest way possible.
Well, we keep using the word solvency. What actually, I mean, the Sears bill obviously had a different threshold of what it considered to be solvency. Sure. What is solvency?
Well, it's making sure that we have money to cover our own interests in the future. Right now, I think we have $550 million in the fund, which means I barely think if we ever was to slip into a large recession, we would probably barely get through 2 months before we have to start borrowing from the federal government. What we want to do is set the state up in a place that we have a fund that can sustain itself into the future and not have to worry about obtaining large amounts of debts, especially from the federal government. So that's where we're headed.
And does that assume that a normal recession, or are you looking at actually having a healthy enough fund that it could weather another 2008 like recession?
Well, I mean, whether it's a minimal recession or whether it's a 2008 recession, we want to do a responsible government should be in place to be able to weather that storm. So we need to be able to get us into a position that can do that. And by the way, whether it's business or labor or anywhere in between, that only helps ensure we have a stronger economy in the future to weather such an issue, whether it's a minimal recession or strong one. And this is the last thing that I think our state really needs to tackle to make sure we're headed in a sound pathway, and so we will continue to push for that from the House perspective. Representative Schuring will continue to lead that for me into the next General Assembly, and I know that he's reached out to have some more conversations with both sides.
In the past,